This is Radio Brockley.
Hello and welcome to Brockley News Extra, the programme where you get the chance to hear all you need to know about what's happening in and around the hospital, as well as updates on other local events and people who work in the community. I'm Alan Joyce, and coming up today we'll be hearing the quite incredible story of one man's quest to become a record breaker. We spoke to Paul Parrish from the Aspire charity, which are based right here in the hospital, and he recently became the oldest person ever to complete the world's toughest triathlon, the Arc de Challenge, which saw him run, swim and cycle all the way from central London to Paris. We'll be hearing all about his incredible story over the next hour, so stay tuned to London's official #1 hospital radio station, Radio Brockley. Well, a few months ago, Paul Parrish, who is the Director of Fundraising and Marketing from the Aspire charity, came into the studio to tell us about a challenge which he was training up for called the Arc de Challenge, one of the world's toughest triathlons. Now, only 19 people had ever completed it before, and if he was successful, he would become the oldest person ever to complete it. Well, last month, I'm delighted to say that Paul did successfully complete the challenge, and in the process wrote himself into the history books. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that he's come back to Radio Brockley to tell us all about it. So hi, Paul.
Hi, Alan.
Thanks for coming back, and congratulations. Magnificent achievement.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Before we get into all that went on during the actual challenge itself, can you explain to anyone listening exactly what the challenge was, the Arc de Challenge?
Okay, so the challenge itself was to run from Marble Arch in London, obviously, down to Dover, which was a run of 87 miles. And then from Dover, I then swam the Channel and went to Calais. And from Calais, I then cycled to the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, which was 181 miles. That was the challenge. It was, arguably the world's hardest triathlon. And yeah, I did it.
And why on earth did you want to take that on? I mean, most people would see that and think, never in a million years. Why did you want to do that?
I think there's a lot. There's a lot of reasons. I think I've talked in the past, and I don't mind talking about. I was a very unhealthy, heavy drinking, heavy smoking kind of guy, and I kind of, as part of getting out of that lifestyle, I began to do some sports. Started with a marathon. I worked for charities, and I realised that I could raise money by doing, a marathon, and then they went into triathlons, and they became Ironman triathlons, and then they became double Ironman triathlons. And of course I got to this situation where my friends were getting quite bored of sponsoring me unless I did something a little bit bigger. So by the time I'd done a triple Ironman, I thought, I'm running out of ideas. But I was aware of the Arc de Arc, and I knew it was something that very, very few people had done. I knew it was a huge, huge undertaking, but I did think it would be a great way of raising money, and I'm delighted that I was able to raise it for Aspire, where I work.
So triple Ironman, as you call it, how different is that to the Arc de Arc? How big a challenge is that, just to give us an idea of what you've done previously?
Well, I think perhaps on paper, something like a triple Ironman may seem almost worth. It's a sort of worse. It's a 7-mile swim, followed by a 336-mile bike ride,
wow,
followed by a 78-mile run. So it sounds astonishingly long.
Yeah.
It is, and it takes a lot to do, but it doesn't have the technical side that, say, the Arc de Arc has. And the technical side really is swimming the Channel, which in its own right is like climbing Everest. But doing that, having run 87 miles, makes it a completely different, much harder event. So, although, you often look at the mileage and think, gosh, that's an incredibly long way. With the Arc de Arc, there was a lot more technical, lot more things that could go wrong, mainly because of the Channel and the run, the effect the run had on me beforehand. Well,
let's talk about the training now. When we last saw you a few months ago, we were obviously talking about your training programme, and presumably you had to really ramp that up in the months immediately beforehand. So tell us sort of what a typical day was like for you in the sort of 2 or 3 months leading up to the Arc de Challenge.
A lot of the training revolved around swimming. I would occasionally go out and do some really long runs when I was able to. I commuted to work by bike, so a typical day might be I'd get up at 5. I would be in the pool for 6, but I'd cycle to the pool. Then I'd cycle from where I live up in Wheatamstead, on the other side of St Albans, and cycle down to Stanmore. I'd then swim at lunchtime, cycle home, and then eat a lot. And it would be just things like I had to try and kind of weave everything into the day. Weekends, would be up early, sometimes going down to Dover to swim with other Channel swimmers. And then getting back and doing family stuff, I had to sort of be, I'd have to be back early afternoon, and so a lot of it revolved around really early mornings, and then getting slightly irritable by late afternoon. But so it was a very difficult balance, because I was also working and having a family life as well. And towards the end, I think it did get selfish. There was no doubt about it. There's a certain selfishness about having to do anything like that, and I'm probably underplaying that.
I was going to say, I'm presuming for the last 2 or 3 months, you literally more or less had to dedicate your whole time to prepare for this.
No, I didn't actually. By then, I knew that it was a bit like cramming for an exam. The cramming I'd actually been, unlike when I did do exams in real life, I did less cramming. I kind of had prepared myself, probably by doing these double and triple Ironmans. There's a huge psychology to it. You can never really train to run 87 miles. Time would never allow that, or cycle 181 miles. So a lot of it is making a huge mental leap of faith that you're going to be able to, once you've gone past, say, 26 miles, a normal marathon distance, that you can keep going. And I'd exposed myself to enough events to know that psychologically, although I have some real ups and downs, if I kept going forward, I would eventually finish. The Channel was different. It was too many unknowns. There was too many variables in that, and I had to just concentrate more on swimming. But with 3 months to go, I'd done lots and lots of the work, and I just kind of kept it ticking over. And I suppose by most people's standards, yes, it was a lot of training, but it was a little bit more managed by then.
I was going to say, it's the Channel swim that I know when you came in last time that you were most worried about. It was perhaps arguably your weakest of the three, and you said you'd in fact not been swimming for that long anyway. So tell us about the preparations you did for the Channel swim.
Yeah, I'd learned to swim when I got into triathlon. Really, I couldn't swim, and I'd never been taught as a child. My father was disabled, so was very frightened of water, so we never went as children to go swimming. And I think being living in Birkenhead as I did in those days, we didn't have much access to swimming pools, and schools didn't really take us down there, so I didn't swim. I kind of had an approximation of swimming, and then when I joined a triathlon club, I had to learn, and initially I taught myself, and then the triathlon club helped me. To do the Channel, I went to see a coach who was an amazing bloke who everything, all my bad habits I had to unlearn, and I began to swim properly. And it was still something that I was aware was, had lots of things can happen in the Channel. Psychologically, you can become, very down. It's tidal. You get swept. You don't get swept back and forth. You don't get swept to the coast and out. You get swept up and down the Channel. And when the tides are strong, it can add hours and hours onto your swim, and then a lot of it depends on how you are with that. And many people will get very close to France and just never, get easily within a mile of the coast or even less. Sometimes as much as a couple of 100 metres and never land. And
really?
You will be able to see the houses and the lights, but if your energy is gone, no amount of swimming will get you there, and you eventually just have to get taken out of the water. And I was aware of this, and actually one of the guys who had attempted the Arc de Triomphe literally the week before me had got within 1,000 metres of the coastline and then began to be swept back out to sea, and they'd had to curtail his swim. That was really preying on my mind.
Yeah, it must have been. And is that why most people who've attempted it don't finish it? Because of it? Is it like an external thing like that where it's, beyond your control, it's the tides as much as anything else?
Yeah, I think tides and training. I will, you asked me about the training. I did put a huge amount into swimming. I was aware that, I wasn't from a swimming background. I was aware I sometimes felt like a bit of an imposter into this world, and it is it's a very different world, but it is possible to do, it is, and I think with the right training and talking to the right people and just having I'm very lucky that I work at Aspire where we have a swimming pool, so I could, if you pardon the pun, immerse myself in swimming, day and night really. And it has to have it's like anything, you learning an instrument, learning to paint, whatever, you'll get better at it if you carry on doing it, I think.
But as you say, I suppose learning, putting the practice in the swimming pool is going to be extremely different. It's almost impossible to prepare for a Channel swim in that respect, presumably.
Yeah. You can get used to. You can improve your stroke, which makes it easier in the water. But actually, then when you get into the actual sea itself, if it's rough, your stroke goes to pot completely, and and you're doing all sorts of different things that you wouldn't normally do in a pool. but you're used to water, and I think for me it was, getting used to and having some confidence. So by the time I did come to do the swim, I knew I had a decent chance, as opposed to a year before. I can remember just realising that I had no chance of getting across the channel.
So I mean, with about, let's say, I don't know, a week to go before you started the challenge, was there any point where you actually thought, I can't do this? And I'm knowing you and what I've spoken to you, I'm assuming that you were pretty positive about it all the way through.
I seem quite positive on this. I know I come across as being an enthusiastic, quite a positive person, but like anybody, I have that side of me which is full of self-doubt. And before I do any event, I have a great deal of fear. I have a great deal of lack of self-confidence. And I know as a sports person you should always, I'm talking quite honestly to you, but as a sports person you're meant to have that real, I can do this kind of thing. And it's not, for me, it's not true. I'm aware that, there are very, very many things that can influence me. More than anything is probably my head. And I'm always scared that something will just, switch and I'll decide that I can't do something. Up till now, I've been very lucky. But I can't say that I will ever approach anything on this scale with anything but a certain amount of fear. And a lot of humility. You have to realise it's much bigger. These things are much bigger than I am. I can't front up to them equally, and I just feel like I kind of have a brief amount of time when maybe I'm given an opportunity.
So let's talk about the challenge itself now. Let's take you back to early September. Immediately before the challenge started, how much notice did you get before you actually started? Because presumably the start at Marble Arch was very much dependent on the weather and the tides as well, was it? Absolutely
right. Yeah, absolutely right. So basically we were starting the event based on the tide that we thought I could swim on, if that makes sense. So we were actually looking into the future based on a long-range forecast, which is quite difficult in the channel. We then set the time of the run depending on how much rest and how much time we thought it'd take me to get down there. So I'd sort of factored in a run and rest time of 40 hours, which was quite good. And I actually, which meant I set off from Marble Arch at 8 on a Saturday evening and ran through the night, which is something I really enjoy doing. But I was actually told on the Thursday prior to that Saturday that I might be up for it. The weather had changed quite a lot and had become very, very variable. So I knew then that it was a long shot that I was going to be able to get this chance to swim the channel. But based on long-range weather forecasts, we decided to go with that Saturday. So from the Thursday, I knew I was on call.
Right. But there was a strong possibility, presumably, that it could have been sort of called off or moved at the last minute, and that mentally would have been very difficult to deal with, I assume.
Yeah, and as I'll tell you, it looked like I wasn't going to swim at all. Right. So yeah, it really was. I knew that's the nature of channel swimming. Yeah. You are to even try and predict a day in advance is far too long. It's a narrow stretch of water, and things change very quickly in it.
So you get to the Thursday, you get the call saying 2 days' time. So what goes through your mind? I mean, how do you cram in your sleep during that point? How does it all work?
Well, do you remember those did you ever do really big exams?
Yeah.
Yeah. You remember those when you were terrified? I maybe felt suddenly that that's how I felt. But I also felt almost like it was like my parents were saying, this is a really important exam, and I was kind of aware that a lot of people were watching. And I felt very nervous about that. I suddenly thought, it's really here. Oh dear, I can't get out of it now. And has it all been bravado? And, am I the right sort of person for this? And, will I even finish the run? I mean, somebody earlier in the year hadn't even finished the run. And you think, oh gosh, this, is this all nonsense? So, again, there was a lot of kind of self-doubt about it. But at the same time, it was, I'm going to have to do it.
So did you get much sleep at all before it started? Or?
Yeah, I'm a good sleep. Because of the training, I'm quite a good sleeper. And I ate a lot and, obviously went to the pub. No, I didn't go to the pub. No, ate a lot and, just prepared myself. I mean, the morning, so I woke up, for instance, Saturday morning, and I'm aware that, at 8 o'clock I'm going to start on this challenge that I've trained for 3 years. So what did I do? I did the ironing. I made some food. I made a really good lentil dal for after. I thought that'd be nice. A little stew. And changed the bedclothes. And put the bins out.
Can't believe you had to do the ironing on a day.
I had to do the ironing. Can you be... well, yeah. And... well,
I suppose it's a distraction, if nothing else.
It's a distraction. Yeah. And I kind of think I wanted everything to be just so for when I got back.
So you didn't sleep during the day then, immediately prior to the run?
I had a little doze at about 3. But actually, I was too was too keyed up, really. And I did actually doze off briefly. And then, it was up, and suddenly I realised this is my, I had to prepare my last meal. Actually, it sounds a bit like an execution, doesn't it? And I had to, what was I going to have? So I think I was pretty much into carbohydrates, so lots of pasta.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Had to drive down, got a lift down to Marble Arch, got held up into heavy traffic, so I managed to be late for my own farewell party, and had to run the last half mile down to Marble Arch. So, just for the record, I've run the longest arch to arc that anyone's done. I just want that noted now. I did an extra half a mile, so I could get there on time.
Excellent. More bragging rights. Well, there was even more, but the sound of it, what happened afterwards was, which we'll come on to later, you actually had to cycle more as well. Tell us a little bit about the team you had with you during the challenge, before we actually get into the challenge itself, because they must have played an absolutely massive role as well. Yeah,
huge role. I'm really lucky that I've had some people who've been fantastic supporters of the sort of stuff that I've done. I also work with a great team at Aspire, and I think the Aspire team are really keen to, bearing in mind I'm their manager, and you think they might, they've put things in that I've said to them in the past. No, I'm a good manager, but they all wanted to help, and actually the Aspire fundraising team started off and went through the whole night with me. So they had a rota together, and they went through the whole night, and that's arriving at 2 a.m. to look after me and give me drink and give me food and have me be rude. No, I wasn't rude, but have me just sort of just take drinks and just run on. And they were fantastic, and they really put a lot into it. And they were sort of relieved by a guy called Dave, who has always looked after me. He's been very responsible actually for my swimming. He's a great swimmer, and he was really keen to take me down into Dover. I then had another colleague on the boat with me, and another Channel swimmer, and they were people who were good on boats. They knew that they wouldn't get seasick, and they kind of were real cool hands, and they kept me in check. They also listened to all my all the instructions I'd issued them with, which sometimes, as I'll tell you, I wish they hadn't. And then over in France, again, I had a colleague from work and another great friend who's always sort of looked after me on all these sort of events, and they went across with me. As I say, I had a photographer with me and the race organiser. So, there was always support for me, and there was always, it was tough work for these people, really hard work, really antisocial hours, and incredibly boring watching a middle-aged man trotting along, doing his thing, taking himself a bit too seriously.
I'm guessing none of them would have swapped places with you, though, and I guess that's part of the reason why they were quite happy to do what they did. I don't know, after about 4 or 5 hours in a car with one another, I think some of them sometimes think, every now and again they try and run with me, and I say, that's not allowed! Yeah.
But yeah, no, they were absolutely amazing. I couldn't have done it without them.
So you stood at Marble Arch ready to begin. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, you say, on that particular night. I mean, what was going through your mind at that stage?
Well, I was a bit embarrassed because a lot of people were there, people I swim with, people from school, my family, as somebody who's about to do the Arch to Arc, people. There was a lot of people there, and I kind of thought, is this all for me? Am I going to do it? And it was quite a bit of pressure. Yeah. My work colleagues, it was really lovely, and then I had to get... one of the things, I had the race rules read out to me. I remember that, thinking, it never occurred to me there were rules to this thing, and actually it is an event. People do compete for time and things. And
is that rules in terms of how, what windows you have to complete bits within, or is it far more complicated than that?
Yeah, really windows, and also, in terms of the making it fair, and because of things like the channel, can be variations. And I think one of the rules was that, if we all agree that this is fair, that we can change any rule we want at any time, which I thought was actually a great way of looking at when you put an event together, which is so long and so many things can happen. Road closures, all this sort of that, which have all happened in the past, then it's deemed that providing somebody can finish and it's done in a fair way, that we can change the rules. And I think that's a fair way of looking at it.
Now, you had a tracker giving live updates online and via Twitter your whole journey, and I was one of the people following it every step of the way.
On your honeymoon?
On my honeymoon. That's how dedicated I was. I have to say, I was absolutely into it. I mean, I could not go more than a few hours without checking on your progress. What was the support like from people monitoring your progress online?
Well, I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. I had no idea that people were following initially. It never occurred to me. And then as I went along, my crew were obviously on the Twitter feeds and the Facebook feeds, and had my phone and looking at my texts, and suddenly I was aware that I was getting texts and messages from people, as I say, people I've been at school with 33, 34 years beforehand, people I'd known, I didn't even think had noticed me from other events that I'd done and the kind of circles in which I move. It became quite emotional for me, and it's just, it's things like you have just told me about, I was aware actually that you were watching me as well, because there's something, I think you'd sent a message through to one of the, and I thought, that's incredible, I hadn't realised that. And again, it's really humbling, I'm trying to do it for a good cause, but there's ego there, I'm doing it for myself as well. I'm thinking, this is a lovely thing. I am very privileged. I know some amazingly fantastic people. I hadn't realised how behind me they were, and it did mean a huge amount. In the channel, to have some of the texts and some of the messages, and some of them really obscure, things that only I would get, but they meant such a lot to me.
It did spur you on then?
More than anything, absolutely. And then, of course, the money started going up. And this was the other thing I hadn't really... I thought I might raise a little bit more, but suddenly the money really started pouring in. And money from people I still don't know who they are. At the moment, I'm still trying to respond personally to everybody who's donated, but some people just heard about it by... Well, there's a guy called Jim Parrish who sponsored me. He's just said, I've heard you got the same surname as me. I think it's worth a few quid.
Brilliant.
And it was things like that. And it can only spur you on. And also, with that many people watching, you have to think twice about giving up because you feel a bit tired. So, yeah, it made a big difference.
For anyone who's just tuned in, I've got Paul Parrish in the studio with me here on Radio Brockley, on Brockley News, who's telling us about his Arch to Arc challenge, going all the way from Marble Arch to the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Incredible challenge, and I'll tell you the details of how you can sponsor Paul later on during this as well. So let's talk about the run now. I mean, did it all go to plan? Any dodgy moments, or was it all fairly straightforward in the end?
This is really boring, but it actually went to plan. It really did. And I wanted to do it in 24 hours, and the thing that slightly annoyed me about myself was I did it in just less than 22. And I had been really rigid with myself because I wanted to make sure that I wanted to preserve myself for the swim. And
so you were just too good then?
I wasn't too good. I think I was just so well supported. I think it's the support. I mean, people were just looking after me, and I was eating well. I didn't, I made sure I wasn't... You can sometimes get quite nauseous, but I was really careful about not eating too many sweet things, which is a natural thing that you want to do when you're doing events. And I just felt okay. And I think maybe all those years of training, suddenly at that moment, it all came good. And I think the adrenaline maybe, but also being very disciplined about not going too fast, because there's obviously a tendency, when you've got that adrenaline and all that kind of thing, and people are watching, and you think, I want to do really well, but actually I managed to keep it all in check. And I arrived down in Dover in pretty good shape, and it had been okay.
And were you thinking ahead when you were doing the run? Were you at the back of your mind constantly thinking, I've still got the swim to go, or were you very much in the moment?
I was very much thinking about the swim. Yeah, I'll be honest, everything I did was based around that swim. That's where I knew that it didn't, the run was really important, but it was really important for how I preserved myself during it. I was also aware that the race organiser, or the race event manager and the race director were having a lot of conversations, and I knew that was a bad thing. I knew they were talking about the channel the next day, and I could tell that suddenly things had gone a bit quiet. There wasn't the communication, and as I was coming into Dover and getting close, I was pretty certain that the swim wasn't going to be on the following day, so I was waiting for that news as well.
So this was again to do with the tides or the weather, or what specifically was...
that week I went, the weather had turned, and we knew we only had a small window of weather, and that kept being confirmed. The closer we got to it, we knew the weather window was shrinking all the time, and it wasn't looking great. I just had that feeling. So when you end in Dover, you go through, and there's a monument to Captain Webb, who's the first person to swim the channel, and that's the end of the run. And I went through there and didn't really stop. I just went straight into the channel, as in to not to swim it, to kind of get my legs sort of immersed in cold water, because that's actually a really good way of stopping stiffness. And but I wasn't elated, because I knew I was about to get some bad news. So when we got to the hotel, they basically told me that it was pretty certain that the swim wouldn't be on. And we spent They spent a lot of time making phone calls to the boat pilot, and around about 8 o'clock, we decided that I wasn't going to be swimming. I might be able to swim. I was told to get my head down and try and get as much sleep, not to set the alarm, and hopefully maybe later in the day or in the next couple of days, the weather might clear and would try and get me out, but it definitely wouldn't be on for the following day, not any time soon, and so the photographer didn't charge up his camera. I also had a conversation with the race director, and he said, look, chances are, I know you want to do it properly, we're going to have to we'll go for the beginning of October, and we'll have to do the whole run again and try and get you down then. So I was quite disheartened.
Well, very disheartened, I imagine, after all that preparation and mentally gearing yourself up for that.
And plus the photographer actually was quite important to me in some ways, because he had documented a lot of my training. He was also going on holiday at the beginning of October, so he was going on honeymoon at the beginning of October, right. And he suddenly said, well, if you go beginning of October, I'll never be able to document the rest of it. I thought, oh no, he's done all this 6 months of filming me training and lots of voiceovers and stuff like this, and I thought that's a real shame, and I really wanted a kind of a memory of it, and I was really disheartened. As I say, he hadn't charged up his batteries on his cameras because it was pretty certain that we weren't going to go.
So, presumably, it must have been very difficult to try and get any sleep, because at the back of your mind, you were just thinking, this is it. But at the same time, you had to stay mentally ready for it at any point.
Yeah, I wish I had. I actually pottered around and read a book, which just seems stupid when I should have been going to sleep. So I didn't turn the light out until probably about 10:30 or 11. And a terrible thing to do. Because I got woken up at 8 in the morning by somebody hammering on the door, going, we're on. We're on. The weather's changed. You're on. Get going, get ready. You need to get some breakfast.
So how much notice did you actually have then?
4 hours.
4 hours, wow.
Yeah, so suddenly I had to have my breakfast, get all the gear together, get the car, there's a lot of gear that you take over. And fortunately, the two crew had decided to make the move, because we'd almost put them off. But they said, no, let's get down, just in case. And that was really, really good that they did that. And they bowled up. We had them there just on time. And they helped get everything on, and suddenly it was all happening.
Were you mentally ready for it, though? Because in your mind you must have pretty much given up. So how do you get yourself back in a state of mind where you're ready for it again? I do think back that maybe it probably helped. It may, although I did sit up and read a book, it probably made me sleep, because I suddenly wasn't thinking about it. I was resigned to the fact I wasn't going to be swimming. So I kind of had to snap back into it. And as soon as I heard I was going, I had 4 hours to really get back into kind of like, oh gosh, the exam's about to start mode again, and have I done my Latin and all that sort of stuff. And I was, it was one of those feelings of, I can't believe this is really happening to me. How did it get to this? How on earth have I ended up in a situation where I'm going to get on a small boat and I'm going to have to jump off it and swim next to it, and lots of things like that. How did this happen? This is a very special Brockley News Extra as we speak to record breaker Paul Parrish from the Aspire charity. But don't forget, Radio Brockley is with you 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, including on Sunday evenings at 8:30, your chance to win some Radio Brockley goodies. Without leaving your bed, it's Bedside Bingo with David Rauch. Plus there's Brockley News every Sunday just before bingo at 8 o'clock. Let's hear part 2 then of Paul Parrish's incredible story. So you're in the boat. What was the weather like for the swim? Was it far from perfect? Obviously, because it was touch and go, I'm assuming it wasn't perfect conditions anyway.
Well, actually, when it starts off, beautiful sunny day, and they basically, you go out of Dover Harbour, you go round to a beach called Shakespeare Beach, you jump off the back of the boat, you swim to the beach, climb all the way out, back onto dry land, and then they'll sound a klaxon and the swim begins. You don't get back into the water, right. Start swimming. And initially it looked all right. I thought, this is quite nice. As the swim went on, and I don't know anything about this is all I've heard afterwards, about 5 or 6 hours into it, I remember feeling quite queasy, which I thought, oh gosh, that's strange, I'm not happy about that. And I was always very hyper-vigilant about what my body was doing. I was always worried about, the effect of the run on me. And to feel queasy, I thought, oh no, have I eaten something? What was actually happening was about 5 to 6 hours in, I hit some really, really bad weather, really rough weather. And a couple of channel boats taking other soloists around, they turned back. And the pilot had said to my crew, look, he's in a lot of deep water here, so to speak. You know, it's probably going to, if he comes through this, he'll probably add about 5 or 6 hours onto his swim.
Wow.
And he's not going to end up where we want to put him. He's going to end up down in Calais. I knew nothing about that. You're actually in the water, you're quite insignificant, and even though I've seen video of it now, and you can see the boat going from side to side, but I wasn't aware. And actually, I swam out of it. It didn't last as long as I think the pilot expected, and then I kind of rocketed across the channel. I seemed to go across quite quickly then.
So the first part of the swim was actually almost the most difficult part.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah. But as I say, I don't have much of a sensation about that. You know, you're right in I can see photographs now of huge tankers going past and things like that. In the water, you're so low down, you don't have any concept of anything apart from the boat next to you. That's all, and the sun. I was always aware where the sun was and where ferries were. I kept thinking the ferries were to one side of me. I confused myself completely. I wasn't looking at ferries at all. I was looking at other things.
Sure. One thing you did have to build in, though, presumably, was obviously still eating during this time. And we talked about this briefly when you came in last time. How did that work? What did you manage to eat, and how did they get it across to you? Right, so we had those little pint milk bottles, and they were filled with a substance called Maxim, which is effectively like a baked potato in powdered format. Oh, lovely.
And it's lemon and lime flavour, so try and get your head around that. Lemon and lime flavour baked potato. Oh. And it's horrible stuff, and it certainly is once you start having that every hour. Because you really don't want it. But we also had my treats. So my treats would be things like porridge. Porridge was really good. Watery porridge was fantastic. So you can glug it down. We tried things like those kind of pasta soups and things like that. Yeah. But I wasn't. Apparently, I just. Yeah, I didn't want to know. Apparently, my eating habits were terrible. I think it's more the crew were put off than I was. And then just treats like little bits of chocolate and stuff. And Coca-Cola, if I'm allowed to use brand names, had an astonishing effect. So goodness knows what they put into it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a real. As an endurance athlete, you tend to use it over any other drink.
Yeah. I
shouldn't be quoted on that. It doesn't often make a difference.
Other brands are available. Yeah.
Other brands are available, and it does make a massive difference. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. So, I mean, did there at any point during the swim did you feel like quitting, or thought that you would? I thought, yeah. Without being too technical about it, I had told my crew, this is really crucial, I told my crew that I didn't want to know anything about time or place. I said to them, I will swim until I hit the land, I run out of sea, or you take me out. Anyway, that was a complete lie, because actually I discovered that all I wanted to know was time and place. So for one, one of the things I did was I said to them, feed me on the hour, feed me every hour. So instantly I was counting the feeds, so I knew how long. I then made another stupid mistake, which was over all the training, I'd been able to compare myself to other channel swimmers, and I kind of knew how fast they'd got across the channel. So I had in my own mind a time when I knew I'd be near the French coast, which was in fact 14 hours. Right. So all the time, once I got to feed 14, I was thinking, well, where's the coast? What I hadn't realised was that the crew, because I'd asked not to know anything about time and place, had decided it'd be a good idea to change my feeds to every 45 minutes, which is fine. So I was beginning to really get disorientated and thinking, why can't I see land and all this kind of thing. So I was thinking, I'm in 20 hours here. Which then caused a knock-on panic effect. I was thinking, well, I've been washed down the coast. I've gone past Calais. And the coast of France curves away eventually, and you'll never ever make land. So there was one brave thing that I did, which was I basically decided that I had to finish the event, but I had to finish it on the right terms. So I wasn't going to ask to give up, although I'd stop and feed, and I'd also do another really bad thing, which was look to the coast, and I could see lights, but each time they looked further and further away. And at one point, I was so convinced I was at Calais, I actually believed I heard industrial machinery, the sound of port. I was actually looking at rural northern France. But that's how my mind was beginning to work. But I made one brave decision, I think, and that was to say, OK, I will swim until I am asked to get out of the water. And the pilot says, it's no good, you're not going to make it. And it was a horrible moment, because I thought, OK, I've made that decision, now please take me out of the water, because I'll really, really need you to get me out, because this is going nowhere. I can tell that I'm getting no closer to the coast. All in my head. All of this is in my head. It's now dark. It's sort of, I've swum through the night, so starting at midday, I was well into night, so very disorientated. Lights on the coast are very, very confusing. And
I can only describe it as my mind, like, it became like a white heat. It was just so intense. Everything was really intense. And suddenly some bloke, the race, the event manager, jumped into the water next to me. And the only reason, you are allowed a support swimmer at times, and we had agreed that I would have a support swimmer only if I needed to break through a tide, because if you miss a tide, it's another 4 to 6 hours swimming.
Right.
So I was really depressed because this guy jumped in next to me, and I thought, he wants me to race a tide. I don't know if I can do this, you know. Have I got the energy to do this? The thought of doing another tide was too much. And then I was just suddenly aware, it's the most amazing moment for me, that the boat that had been by my side all this time suddenly wasn't by my side. And that meant one thing, that meant the water was too shallow for it to come in any closer. And I suddenly realised that actually I wasn't miles away as I thought, but I was actually right on land.
Wow.
And suddenly I could feel my fingers scraping, because I'm doing front crawl, and I could feel my fingers scraping the sand, and it was just the best moment. You know, it's just wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful. And then I couldn't climb out. I couldn't walk out the water because my legs had stiffened up from the run the day before. So I literally had to crawl out on my hands and knees, which wasn't really very dignified. I wanted to make a great exit.
It's allowed after that many hours.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry too much about it. How many hours did it actually take you then in the end?
17 hours, 24 minutes.
My goodness.
So about 3.5 hours. I missed the closest point to Britain by about 1,000 metres, which would have taken a couple of hours off the swim.
Yeah.
But I just missed it, and I didn't know. I didn't know any of that.
I mean, absolutely incredible. I mean, did you not want to be asking a lot of questions whilst you were swimming? It sounds to me like, you know, you were very much concentrating on your thing. I think if it had been anyone else, they'd be constantly asking for updates. But
no,
very important for you not to then.
And I did lose it. I was at feeds. I kept saying, "I know what's happened. I know I've been taken down the coast. I know I'm near Calais," and my crew, following my orders, my instructions, couldn't tell me anything, and just kept saying, "You don't know anything. You don't know anything. Just keep swimming." "Oh no, I'm in trouble. I know. I'm not going to make it." No, just keep swimming.
And did they do the right thing? I mean, you know, looking back on it now, was that the best thing for you, do you think?
Well, they did what they were told.
Yeah.
No, now I'd say I need to know where I am, because obviously it became it plays huge tricks with your mind, you know. And your mind's a bit. I mean, to hear the industrial machinery of Calais, and I can still, even talking to you, I can remember that. I can remember, you know, quite distinctly hearing industrial machinery. It just makes you realise how your mind is really, and how it can just kid you.
So when you finally got out the water in Calais, I mean, what shape were you feeling in then? I mean, were you even thinking about the cycle by that stage, or did you mentally think, "I've done it. This is, you know, I've conquered this bit. I'll be fine for the rest of it"? Well,
first of all, it was like motor mouth. I couldn't stop talking. I was so excited. I couldn't believe I just swum the channel. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So I was recounting all sorts of stories that were completely irrelevant to anything. I just couldn't stop talking. And then I was due to get some proper rest, but I was actually so excited by what had happened, and my back was hurting a lot from swimming, and I couldn't really rest. So I just thought, I want to get the cycle done. You know, I know it's going to be slow and painful, and it's probably the last thing on my mind, but I just want to get it done. So we kind of had I think after 4 hours I was up and getting ready, had some food.
4 hours?
We got 6 hours. It was, in the end, it was a 6-hour stop, but basically I tried to sleep for a couple of hours, but couldn't, and so just had to go for it. Had a shower, made myself feel a bit more human. I mean, it felt a bit odd. I just, you know, I had just swum the channel, so and we went for it. We decided to just get going. And there's a beautiful, beautiful day over in France. And if anyone's looking for a place for a holiday between Calais and Boulogne, that bit of coastline, which we all avoid, is gorgeous, but it's really hilly, which you don't want on a bike.
No. But I mean, as you got on the bike and you started cycling, did you suddenly think, actually, this isn't going to be as straightforward as I thought it was? Because I remember you saying initially, as I say, as soon as you've done the channel swim, the cycling won't be a problem. Did you still feel like that when you got on the bike?
No, I felt, do I really have to do this? And of course, these hills just were interminable. And they probably aren't that bad, but when you've just done all that, they just seem to take forever. And I found it, I just knew it was such a long way to go on a bike. But I suppose mentally I was prepared for it. And you know, again, in my own, you know, without singing my own praises, I think psychologically, I was aware that this was going to be difficult, and I just needed to grind it out, I think is the best best way of putting it.
But you kind of knew that you were going to make it at that stage.
Yes.
The mentally, that side of it kicks in, and you thought, I can't give up at this point.
I just kept thinking, I've just swum the channel.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. So that really helped.
Yeah.
And I did think, well, providing I'm not knocked off my bike or anything like that, I should make it.
And I was very aware, sitting where I was and looking at all the Twitter feeds, that the buzz was really growing at this stage. I got the impression that everyone on Twitter and on Facebook and everyone that was following you kind of knew that this was actually going to happen. Did you get that sense as well from the people around you?
Not really, no. It was very low-key at that point.
Yeah.
I think they just wanted me to just get on with it, and I did as well, so I didn't really... The only... my daughter had spoken to me. At some point I stopped, and I remember my daughter rang me to tell me that she had to go to... The school wouldn't let her come and see me, and that she had double maths, and I can remember saying, I'd sooner do this than have double maths, and... but I kind of thought it'd be quite low-key. And also they stopped reading messages out to me at that point as well. We just wanted to get over. So I cycled through the night, which I really enjoyed. It was rural France. The stars are incredible. And I think I was probably on quite a high. And then we hit the outskirts of Paris around about 5 or 6 in the morning. Could really feel the traffic building up. And we stopped at a petrol station at about 7, where I kind of slumped against the wall. I remember it was like I just fell asleep. Any time I stopped, I fell asleep. And at that point, I was told that I had to stick with the car because we were in the last 10 miles of Paris. You were right. A lot of people were watching and waiting and hoping not to go into work because I hadn't realised that any of this was going on. And getting held up in traffic, in the rush hour traffic of Paris. And that was actually probably the most dangerous part of the whole event, because obviously I'd been cycling for 18 hours or whatever. Yeah. Plus everything else that had happened beforehand, and they're also having to negotiate rush hour traffic in Paris, which isn't that easy.
No, it certainly isn't, and presumably quite frustrating as well, because you were sort of so near, but that was holding you up at the crucial last stage.
My support car was holding me up because I had to stay with it. They wouldn't let me go, and so there's a lot of photographs of me just hanging on to the window, waiting for them at traffic lights and in traffic and everything, and I could have probably been there about an hour earlier.
Yeah.
But it was good to go in with them. They were lovely looking out for me and just checking I was safe and everything.
Yeah, sure. So what went through your mind as you crossed the finishing line in Paris?
Well, as with all my best laid plans, that didn't quite go to plan. So I was dropped off at the Place de la Concorde, and I was told to go up the Champs-Élysées, but just to wait to get so they could get themselves up and parked. And so I trotted up the Champs-Élysées very, very slowly, and I was suddenly aware of lots and lots of people cheering and some banners and everything, and I suddenly realised it's my family and all my friends, and just as I was about 10 yards away from them, a pedestrian crossing turned red, and I stopped for it, and everyone was, "Why have you stopped?" And so there's a bit of video of me suddenly stopping for no reason, and everyone who's cheering suddenly going, "Well, where's he stopped? What's he doing?" Yeah. And just let all these Parisians cross over, and then I finished.
Amazing.
And it was all done.
Yeah.
And sorry.
Must have been a very emotional time for you, and presumably everyone involved in the challenge, really, all your support team and your family and everyone else.
They were lovely. Yeah, it was a lovely. It was a bit overawing in many ways because I hadn't expected to see everybody there, not so many people, and it was overawing because I guess one moment can't really capture everything, and you I think we tend to put a lot of importance on just one single moment. It was a whole long process, and to try and sum it all up, you want that moment to be really, really intense, but I was totally overawed by the situation. I was very tired, I guess, and I couldn't think of anything that was great to say apart from, what are you all doing here? And I couldn't really thank people enough. It's one of my regrets is I just couldn't react to the situation in the way that I want to, in any profound or demonstrative manner.
I guess now's your chance then. So everyone who supported you during the whole process, all your support team and your family, and what would you say to them now?
Oh, I think they've been brilliant. I think they've put up with so much, and the time that people have spent looking after me, and the time out of their lives, and I think the boredom they've had to endure watching, as I say, this middle-aged bloke kind of follow his dream. I can't thank them enough. But also just all the people that supported me while I was doing it. it is really humbling. I I'm slightly embarrassed by it in a way, but also really pleased about it. I mean, people have given so much money. I mean, it's nearly £20,000 now that we've raised. It's huge for Aspire. It's been wonderful, and
it's amazing that you're so humble yourself about it. I mean, what you've achieved is phenomenal. Because let's just recap. I mean, you have become. I mean, you're a record holder now. You're the oldest person ever to achieve this challenge, and only the 20th person ever to do it.
I am.
That's incredible, isn't it?
And the 6th fastest as well, which was really strange, because that certainly wasn't on the
especially when you consider the weather conditions as well, and the fact you very nearly didn't do it at all.
Yeah, no, I was really lucky. But to be the oldest person is... I never thought I'd be proud to be the oldest person to do anything, but that's really good. I am only 49, by the way. I don't act it. And, it is it's a really lovely thing to have done, and to be able to say that, and
I think it's absolutely phenomenal.
Certainly new for me, that's for sure.
And one other thing as well, once you eventually finished the cycle, you then, I gather, had to do another cycle after it had completely finished, all the way back to Luton, not from Paris, obviously, but once you got back home.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the crew and how long-suffering they were. When I got to Paris, I was bundled into a hotel room, and I was able to get washed and changed, and I was then taken back from Paris in a different car to the support vehicle with my wife and my friend Dave. The guys in the support vehicle then headed back to Calais themselves, but broke down just outside Charles de Gaulle Airport. They then had to spend another day in France as they were repatriated, and my car remained in France with my bikes. So I got back on the Wednesday night. I had Thursday to recover. On the Friday, I was doing an interview in Luton, and of course I didn't have a car, so I had to go and get an old bike of mine and I had to cycle all the way to Luton, which, I'll be honest, wasn't the first thing on my mind in terms of a mode of transport, but I thought, well, I'm going to have to do it. And, so it's not all been sitting in an armchair eating pies.
That is unbelievable. Did that fall within the time? I mean, can you claim that as an extra bit of mileage for your Arc de Triomphe?
Well, I think with the half-mile run beforehand, and that, I think we're definitely going to add that. It's definitely the longest Arc de Triomphe. Just remember that, everybody. It's definitely longer than anybody else's.
It's the all-time record.
Definitely the all-time record.
And does this fulfil... I mean, I know you always talked about, the next challenge. Presumably now, surely you must think, that's it. There's no more challenges to do now. You'll never top that, will you?
Yeah, I don't want to. I think it's taken too much time out of my life and other people's lives as well. And I can't ask other people to support me on other things. And I think there's a time to draw a line under every part of your life and move on. So it's the guitar now or something like that.
That's a relief.
I'll be at Led Zeppelin within about 5 months.
So you say you've raised over £20,000. I mean, that's brilliant. What will that do to help the Aspire charity?
It'd be really, really important to me in terms of the, if you think of, specialist lightweight wheelchairs cost, £2,500 to £3,500. I mean, that's, we give out lots of grants to people who need specialist equipment, and I just think, wow, I could maybe help 5-6 people. That's, in a really important way. I think that means something to me. We have the housing, the sort of halfway housing where people can go when they're waiting for their own houses to be adapted, and effectively the money I've raised pays pretty much for the refurbishment and the adaptation of a flat. And again, that makes such a difference to people. So it will be used wisely. And as a fundraising and marketing director, I'm definitely make sure that's used right. No, but of course it will be used really wisely, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that's one thing I have really given. Despite fueling my own huge ego.
Well, so the Aspire team seem to be full of people who set themselves mad challenges. I mean, we talked to Brian earlier on in the year who did that non-stop sort of 12-hour cycle.
He did his spin. I'd sooner have done what I'd done than a 12-hour spin-a-thon and not moving anywhere. At least I got to look at the stars.
Oh, so between the two of you, you've set the bar pretty high for anyone else. I mean, is there anyone else there waiting to do something crazy?
We've got people doing the Aspire Channel swim at the moment, so that's 22 miles in the comfort of your own pool, which is, I'd recommend that rather than the real channel. You think about, I kind of feel quite strongly about this. We all have our challenges, and we can all achieve things that we don't need that we don't think that we can achieve. And I think if we put our mind to it and a bit of time, we can achieve some amazing things. And that doesn't mean running marathons, and it doesn't mean doing triple Ironmans, and that's for people who should go out and get a proper hobby. But I think if you can push yourself, and if your goal is a 5k run, and once for me it was a 5k run, I was not capable of running 5k, but when you can do something like that and you trained it, you should really make the most of it, and and be proud of yourself, and don't worry about people running marathons and things like that. Do the things that you want to do that you think will enhance your life. And I do feel really strong. Don't compare yourself to 12-hour spinathons and things. Do the things that you know are a real test for yourself, and raise a bit of cash for somebody. Obviously do it for Aspire. That would be my recommendation. But do it for something you're really passionate about, and it's a great thing to do. But don't stay where you are. If it's something you really want to do, and it doesn't have to be physical. It could be, as I say, I talked about learning the guitar or whatever. It's something that you think will enhance your life. Don't just sit back there thinking, I can't do it. I promise you can. If you just want to spend a bit of time. You don't have to do it well, but just do it, or just see if you like it.
Well, that's fantastic advice. So if anyone's been listening to this story and still wants to sponsor you, can they still do that, and how would they go about doing that?
Oh, they're always welcome to still sponsor me, and I'd really appreciate anybody who did do that. I do honestly write back personally, I promise. He does, I can say that. Yeah, it's true, it is. I really do appreciate anybody who bothers to sponsor me. There are so many things out there that are sponsorable, and when somebody takes the time and the effort, I think that's the least I can do is just show my appreciation, because I really do appreciate it. There is a Just Giving address, which is www.justgiving.com/Paul Parrish Arch to Arc, and that's the 2 is the number 2.com.
Okay, fantastic. Just to recap on that address again.
So it's www.justgiving.com/Paul Parrish with 2 R's, Arch to the number 2, Arc.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you get plenty more donations. It's been an absolute privilege talking to you, Paul. Thank you so much for coming in, and a massive congratulations from everyone at Radio Brockley for what you've done.
No, thank you, and thank you very much for spending so much time with me and allowing me to talk about it. It was an important part of my life, and I really appreciate you sort of taking an interest in it, and it's very kind of you.
Well, it's been phenomenal, very inspiring as well. Thank you very much for coming in.
All right, thank you.
And don't forget, if you want to find out more about the Aspire, you can visit their website at aspire.org.uk, and do sponsor him as well. It's not too late. A fantastic achievement by Paul there. Really, really interesting interview as well. Now, if there's anything else happening here in the hospital that you want to find out more about, you can call us on extension 5483, and we'll try and cover it on future editions of Brockley News and Brockley News Extra. Stay tuned to Radio Brockley across the week for more information about the events and services available in the hospital, along with the widest range of music you'll ever hear to suit all tastes. And don't forget, Brockley News is every Sunday at 8 o'clock, and Brockley News Extra Mondays to Fridays lunchtimes at midday, and Monday evenings at 8. From me, Alan Joyce, goodbye.